Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the TEDx University of South Africa page. I'm just accepting Gugulethu Mfuphi just now. Oh, wonderful. Hi,
Hello, hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Yourself?
I'm fantastic, thank you. So excited to be here. I'm quite excited. So looking forward to this conversation where you'll set the honors for us and we'll get talking about money.
That's awesome. I'm super excited. First of all, I have to get this out of the way. You look absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I've been at your page and I'm like,
Thank you.
That's great. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm seeing so many people logging in. First of all, TEDx University of South Africa, we are so happy and so excited to have hashed this relationship with the great, the fabulous Gugulethu Mfuphi. And she did a TEDx talk with us this year in October that was happening at Nasrec. And luckily and wonderfully, her TEDx has just been published on the TEDx Global YouTube page. So that's why we thought, let us come and have this conversation. It was selected as one of the most epic talks that we had on the day. I'm seeing that we're losing Gugu. I hope she's going to join us very soon. You know, with this technology, sometimes we're on and off. But if you don't know who she is, I mean, she is a financial journalist who has done quite immense work. She has covered a lot of topics that are surrounding the financial status of the country. And in her talk, she went into very key criteria that affect the everyday person in South Africa. Let me accept she's back again. There we go.
And we're back. Thank you. Technology is being a bit iffy today. It's a friend, but it can be a very fickle friend. So I'm hoping that the line does hold up at least for the next 20 minutes.
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely understand. I was just telling everyone online a little background about your career, your talk that you shared with us, and the nuggets that you have shared. And I think it's quite important to understand that when a TED Talk is selected and is put on the global TEDx page, it means it has been impactful. Everyday South Africans, we have been saying, we need to know more about money. And so let's dive into the interview. I have a couple of questions. Are you ready?
Ever ready for you. I must say I'm used to being on the other side where I'm the one probing and asking questions. So this time around it's slightly different, but I think it will be fun nonetheless.
Listen, I think this seat is a little more fun. I'm enjoying it. But let's go. So I'm very fascinated with all the aspects of the finance, the money, and how we as South Africans are affected. So I think my first questions would be, which side hustle do you wish you had done but haven't gotten a chance to do? Because it's important to note that in your talk, you made it a talking point to say, in this new economy, it's important to have what we now have coined a side hustle.
You're quite right, and it's very important. I guess this concept of side hustles as well isn't necessarily anything new. In the TED Talk, I do mention that growing up, a lot of our mothers used to sell things like Tupperware, AMC pots. My mother used to sell perfumes, fruits and vegetables at some point. So she's always been quite entrepreneurial. And I think it really does speak to the spirit that a lot of South Africans do have. Dare I say, even females who are probably more prominent in that particular space. But it essentially does speak to how, as a society and community, we all need to become a lot more resourceful, particularly when it comes to expanding on our revenue streams and making sure that we're able to augment our salaries to cover the kind of lifestyles that we have. Interesting enough, you asked me what kind of side hustles I wish I had started. And the truth is that there are quite a few. I'm a typical girly girl, and I've often admired the likes of many other, Instagram personalities. Gorgeous Mbali probably comes to mind because she sells makeup. And I've often found that individuals who start off from a passion point, something that they love, that they enjoy, that they do quite well, often tend to find great success in some of the side hustles that they're able to establish and then transition them into corporate businesses. The likes of Theo Baloyi as well also come to mind in terms of how he set up a great space with Batu, now creating even more jobs as to how they've actually empowered a lot of individuals. And I think the secret with side hustles, I guess, I can go on and on and on about the various side hustles I wish perhaps I had started a lot earlier in my life cycle. But I think the secret to it is to number one, find something that you're passionate about and not to keep it a side hustle. Where you can, some side hustles really do present the opportunity for you to grow them and expand them as sustainable businesses. So that's quite important, I think, for us not to continuously to think small, but really scale, think bigger. What more community, continental impact can you actually have with the side hustles that you establish? So yeah, we need to occupy more space in that regard.
Wow, that's fantastic. I guess, you didn't drop too many specifications on which hustles you would want, but I guess I see where you feel your passion resides. As you mentioned, you are a very girly girl. So I think for me, what I take from your answer is find something that you will be able to carry through. And that is where the passion element comes in. And you mentioned something quite important. When you're passionate about something, it has the potential of being greater than just a side. And that is the growth part of it. So thank you for that. In your talk, you also mentioned how money as a subject has emotion around it. And I think historically it has been negative emotion, that in the sense that we're too afraid to talk about money. We're too afraid in personal relationships. It becomes, a very awkward talk, even in the professional sense. So what have you witnessed and experienced? Which emotion do you think has been the most influencing when it comes to money and money decisions?
Yeah, you're 100% correct in terms of saying that money always comes with a sense of emotions, right? When you have too little, you feel frustrated. There's a sense of fear and anxiety that's caused. And when you have a lot and you actually see, I guess for a lot of people who'll be getting their SMS notifications later today, it brings about a sense of excitement, right? And joy, because you're well aware that you're actually able to cover some of the responsibilities that you have. So I think the studies that have been done by academics and a number of corporate institutions do highlight that emotions and money really are quite intricately connected. In the investment community, they also often emphasize the fact that we're often driven by two emotions specifically, and that's fear or greed. And I've actually found that in my conversations with players within the investment and financial community, in my conversations even with ordinary friends and a few other peers, that those are probably the two fears that probably do come to mind significantly when it comes to how we feel about money. Fear of not having enough, of never being able to attain enough, fear of losing what you have. And at times we often do find individuals who find themselves falling into the trap of greed. And it's the festive season, right? So we can't ignore that. And that's traditionally when a lot of people would look or fall into perhaps, get rich quick schemes, investment opportunities that promise them the world, but unfortunately don't actually deliver on those returns. And for me, what I've learned, bearing in mind that I'm saying this as someone who is not a financial advisor, not qualified to share any kind of financial advice, but have witnessed enough within my interactions with financial professionals to understand that it goes back to actually having a plan, fully understanding your purpose and what your objectives are with money. Because the truth is, money is a resource. It gives you options. It's the choice and the freedom and the flexibility to choose what you want to do, when you want to do with your time. So once you fully understand how it is that you plan for your money to be able to help you in terms of reaching the goals, objectives, and themes that you'd like to achieve in life, that then brings about the necessary discipline. So that when you feel like splurging unnecessary, you remember that, hold on, I've actually got this money it's planned and saved for something specific, and I need to reach that objective by this specific time. And at the same time, it keeps you back from understanding maybe elements of greed that might come in when you feel like you might be missing out on the latest WhatsApp group stock fell. Then you tend to actually be a little bit more disciplined to make sure that you too actually spend your money wisely. Don't just take advantage of any get rich quick schemes, but a lot more discernment, discipline, and of course focused in terms of trying to meet your long-term financial objectives. So I've gone a round way to go to explaining about some of the most prominent emotions, but it's important for us to also understand that our childhood traumas, our experiences in relationship with money, our relationship with other people also influences how we choose to spend money or what our view is on money, even your circles of employment as well. So these are all the themes that I guess go back to having a plan, unpacking that with a professional, and then implementing the necessary discipline to make sure that you stick to what it is that you're looking to attain.
Fantastic. I think you've hit all the important parts with the festive season. I think it was very great for us to actually have this chat right now, because like you're saying, it's a time where we tend to deviate from whatever plan that we might have had for the whole year because we want to ball out or do something grand in the name of the festive season. But you do say that if you stick to your plan and don't fall into this get rich quick schemes, perhaps we will be able to treat the festive season or December such as whatever plan that we had for the rest of the year. So I think I appreciate all those important nuggets. So I hope you're all taking notes. So another question that has me sore, that's the fuel price. I mean, it keeps rising and there is no indication I see anytime soon that it will ever go down. Yet salaries, expenses are not seeming to match up with all these life expenses that are going up, yet the income doesn't seem to be like matching up in that scale. Do you feel there's something that individuals can do to save ourselves from such dilemmas that we feel are so out of our control?
You're a very valid question, and it's a loaded one, right? Because I think all of us are frustrated that 20 Rand a liter for fuel, it's quite expensive, and you're right. And there's multiple elements to this particular question. And I guess before we even try to understand what it is that we can do and that's within our control, it always comes back with understanding the macroeconomic environment, right? And how the world around money does work. And unfortunately, this is where we do have a limited sense of control. And this is where I guess the passion for my job also does come in, because these are the conversations that we'd ordinarily have on air, on business shows, to elaborate on the fact that it's politics in the US that influence what's happening in Iraq and Iran and other oil producing states who essentially influence the supply and demand dynamics of things like oil and fuel and its supply across the world. It's things like the COVID-19 pandemic and how countries have responded with their supply chain issues, either closing off some of their ports, opening up a few of their ports, or maybe even also looking to look at other opportunities that might exist there. So overall, it's the dollar-rand exchange rate as well as a currency point that also has an influence on the fuel price. So essentially, as South Africa, because we don't necessarily have oil as a natural resource, we are automatically price takers because we need to import it into the country. Coupled with that, importing it at a particular exchange rate and, of course, at the particular oil price. So by the time it's actually calculated, collated with a few taxes added here and there, fees and import duties, by the time it hits our pockets, we unfortunately just have to take the price as it is. Mm-hmm. The sad part as well is that unfortunately it's not just about the amount of petrol you're pouring into your car, right? But rather also understanding how it's going to influence the cost of food and the cost of goods and services, all of which essentially need to be transported. Because if you think about it, you might be interested in buying a flat screen TV that's imported from another country. It makes its way to the Durban Harbour, needs to make its way from the N3 upwards to Joburg or wherever you might be based. And all of that speaks to fuel. So, long story short, there's very little we can control. But what we can control is our spending habits and what it is that we choose to allocate or direct our money to. And in particular, when it comes to things like the fuel price, well, I guess that also incorporates a lot of budgeting and planning that we need to implement, and also being a lot more cognizant of what it is that you're purchasing, where you're purchasing it from. Are you doing a lot more online purchases? That in itself speaks to logistics. Logistics requires fuel. So it's important for us to really understand that all of these things are interconnected. And there's an institution known as the Statistics South Africa, who essentially would monitor some of these trends through what's called CPI, or consumer price inflation. Very technical word, but all it essentially tells us is how much the cost of goods and services in the country are actually increasing by. So what am I trying to elaborate with this? There's a lot, and it's an intricate calculation, unfortunately, that goes into the things that influence our pockets. But what we can take control of is the resource we have. So understand your pocket, understand your income, understand where it is you need to channel it into in order to make sure that you can live a life that is favorable to your needs, and making sure that where you can, you try to monitor your spending in that regard, and I guess allocate it accordingly. Where cost savings can come in place, carpooling, using alternative forms of transport, working from home maybe instead of always reporting to the office. Those are just like a few simple suggestions that actually come into play, but it always goes back to controlling what you can, which is ultimately the kitty that you control.
Correct. I think, yeah, it was a very loaded question, and there wasn't going to be any miracle answer that would serve all of us and fix all our problems, because these are things that affect us and they're on a global scale. But I think going back to side hustles, that's one means to try and augment your income, as well as just understanding. The best thing is you saying, let us have knowledge and understanding of how things affect our lives. And I don't think there can ever be a loss in us learning more about all these elements that affect us in our pockets and can help us make better decisions on what to spend on, how to save, and to get more creative around that. I'm noticing your question, Zibu. I hope Kuda on the other side is going to be able to just take down all the questions and then send them to me so that I can ask Gugu. So my next question, Gugu, it was a celebration point when you mentioned it on your TED Talk, when you mentioned that there is a rise in single women purchasing property. And you know what? It just filled me with so much excitement, because I think as women, we've come a long way. But my thinking and my question is, why do you think that is the case? Because you said they surpass couples as well as single males. Why do you think there's more single women in this country that are buying property?
Yeah, well, I think that probably needs some emojis and a response, right? Zibu, great question, noted, and I'll be sure to respond to it. And I think met with a lot of excitement, as it should be. But it's not necessarily what I think is actually driving this. It really has to go back to the stats. If you think of how the economy has changed and shifted, it's really created a lot more opportunities since the dawn of democracy for Black South Africans to be active participants in business, in corporate, in entrepreneurship, and of course more Black women themselves as well who are actively participating in the economy. So the more individuals like you and I, Pertunia, are able to go to tertiary institutions, have academic qualifications, access opportunities to work for big corporates, start our own businesses, run consultancies, work within the healthcare fraternity. Essentially, this is just, I guess, a ripple effect of what actually happens when you open up opportunities for more people to participate in the economy. And sometimes we make it sound so heavy and hectic, right? Are you economically included, and using all these bombastic words? But essentially, are you doing something that is productive, that speaks to a need that other people have, and translates into you generating income for yourself or your business? And that's essentially what it is. And what I've seen is that more women are actively participating in the economy, whether through entrepreneurship or other jobs that they have, and that in itself has afforded them the opportunity to be able to purchase more homes. What's also important for us to note is that this is data that has been shared by a number of the bond origination companies. And a bond originator is essentially a one-stop shop that helps you gauge and pre-qualify for a home loan. So they go to all the banks on your behalf, check who has the best interest rate, whether you qualify for 100% or 70% or 80% of a home loan, and then you from there go about deciding what it is that you want to spend your money on, or what it is that you want to qualify for. But what's important to note is that also banks and financial services institutions are starting to pay attention to Black women within the property space. Not because, number one, we economically active and are driving the income, but Black women also, perhaps due to the shifts and changes in, societal expectations and lifestyles, are becoming a lot more liberal in terms of the financial decisions that they take. So whether they're single, whether they're married, even in difficult situations or circumstances, where you find that women have the opportunity to create their own income, that's where they have the ability to spend it as they choose. So I think there's a very broad conversation to be had around it. But for me, whether it's about the macroeconomics and more people coming on board to participate in the economy, whether it's about how financial services institutions are paying attention to people perhaps that they didn't necessarily 30 years ago, being Black South Africans and mainly South African single females. But it's also about how single females perhaps are showing up for themselves, you know, that we know and we believe that we can own our own assets, and that we can create this wealth for ourselves. So it's a dynamic of all of those things essentially working together, and it's coming out to prove possible in the facts and the figures that are published by these companies that actually monitor the numbers and see where the money is coming from.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm seeing a whole lot of people coming in and sending some love to Gugu, sending some love to this conversation that we have. So keep tuning in and stay in. Gugu, I loved how you answered that question, because as much as we might not pinpoint the why this is happening, but I think inclusivity, when the government made it a mandate to have females included and to work towards some equality in for the gender equality in the workplace, I think you start seeing some results such as what we're seeing right now, where females are participating in buying of properties and making these fabulous choices that are going to benefit them, their children. You know, it's just a celebration point that I think should just continue flourishing. So I think we can just move to the next question, and that is about the interest rate. I'm an engineer. My background is engineering, but with the amount of data and the internet and social media and how we are able to converse about different things, it has become very apparent that you cannot make certain subjects out of your space. And the concept of interest rate and us having to know what it is, how does it affect us? When you speak to banking institutions, how will that impact your payment on your car, on your apartment, and so forth? So now we know and we are hearing that it's going to increase. How does that affect our income? And is there anything we can do just to cushion ourselves? Because obviously it's not looking too good if it's going this way.
Yeah, valid question and very important one. And again, this goes back to understanding the world of economics and why it's important. So the reason why we have interest rates is because central banks and institutions across the world use interest rates as a tool to respond to inflation. Do you remember playing Pac-Man when you were growing up? That game that ate away at all the other smaller dots in the system? Yeah. So inflation is essentially that Pac-Man that eats away at your money, if I can call it that, because of where it has to go and how it's actually spent. And it measures the rate at which the cost of goods and services actually increase. So to counteract that, interest rates actually come on board. But essentially what interest rates do is to try to control the macroeconomic system in that regard. So there's a relationship between inflation. When inflation goes up, you'll most likely see that interest rates also have to go up. Hence, there's a global conversation now about the rising world of inflation and interest rates. But what interest rates mean for you and I, for our pockets specifically, is it means one of two things. It will impact either your debt or your savings. So if you save, we've always been told that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, right? That if you save a little money now, you'll gain a little bit of interest, and that interest earns interest on interest, and it makes all these amazing money babies that turn you into someone who has a lot more money than what you started off with, right? So that's how interest will affect your savings. So if you happen to be a saver, majority of South Africans don't necessarily save too much, but it also does impact the pockets of pensioners. And where they are able to save, if interest rates go up, that will essentially have a positive benefit and outcome for your money. It basically means that the little money babies that you could grow will probably grow at a faster rate. That's essentially what it means. But the challenge in South Africa is that we're highly indebted. And this is where it raises a lot of concerns, that if you happen to have any kind of debt, so a credit card, personal loan, home loan, vehicle financing, iskoloto nje, anything that is something you need to pay back to someone, the interest is essentially a cost, a fee, or a premium that you have to pay back on the money that you borrowed. And that's because, again, in big financial terms, it's because there's a risk that individuals take on and banks take on when they lend you money that you actually might not pay it back. So this is their way of just making sure that there is some kind of measure in society overall that interest rates will come back. or rather that you're able to pay back your income. So if you do have debt, do be mindful that we are seeing perhaps what could be described as an interest rate rising cycle. And that's just feedback that we've also been hearing from a lot of economists, individuals whose day job it is to monitor these kind of dynamics. So they are the authorities on it, not me. But what it does mean essentially is that if you do owe any kind of debt, it will become a little bit more expensive, because whatever money or interest that you had to pay in the beginning of the year, or in comparison to what you might have paid in the last 20 months, is now just going to be edged up, notched up by whatever basis points that it increases by. In the last meeting by the MPC, interest rates went up by 25 basis points. But in the broader scheme of things, we're still at fairly low levels. So it's actually still affordable in South Africa to take on some kind of debt. But this is where, again, you need to go back to speaking to a financial services professional, a CFP, financial coach, someone who essentially is qualified to help you say, okay, Gugu, you want to lend 10,000 Rand, you're going to have to pay back 12,000 Rand after a certain period. But you know what? If interest rates go up, it might be 12,500. It might be 13,000. Are you able to have the flexibility to pay that additional money if you have to? So again, this just goes back to understanding the disciplines of money and what it might mean for your income. It won't influence your salary, but it will influence either your saving or your debt. And that's what we need to understand about the influence of interest rates.
Wow. If I'm learning, I hope you guys are taking some notes, because there was a little bit of maybe confusion on my end, but I'm hearing it rather clearly with how you've answered this question, the effects of interest rate. If you are on the savings end, if it increases, there is positivity on that end, but on the debt side of things, obviously it has a more negative impact if the interest rate increases. But like you said, it's about understanding and then making more informed decisions. And as simple as I think an Instagram live is, but I think it is an education platform, and it's easier to consume information when people are having conversations like this. And I hope it will impact those that are listening. Another aspect that you mentioned on your TED Talk, retirement pension fund. So let's start it light. When do you think you'd like to retire?
Well, that's a trick question. According to the law, I'm able to retire from the age of 63, right? But I think the beauty of life that we all need to accept is that we really live in a generation where you can evolve and where you can co-create new career paths for yourselves and a new element of life. So I'm not sure. Financially, I've planned to retire at about 65. That's just to make the calculations correct and make sure that I have a kitty available that I can access should that be the case. But the truth is, the beauty about life is that we constantly evolve. I know people who are in their 60s who are starting out in new careers, or perhaps going back to old careers that they wanted to venture into. So let's put it this way. I'm open-minded, and I definitely want to make sure that I keep my options open, regardless of age. I think life is for living, and up until my final moments, I want to make sure that I'm still doing something very impactful, still of use to society, still able to gain knowledge and to share knowledge, and still have enough money in the kitty to make sure that I can live that kind of life. And it actually reminds me of a question I think we saw a moment ago that I'd like to address from one of our viewers about how millennials can make use of innovative products. And I think that's such a fantastic question, right? Because the truth is, we're millennials, we're young, we're living amazing lives, we on the gram, and we have countless opportunities to tap into our entrepreneurial spirit. And we believe that we'll be young forever, because that's the benefit of life, right? But unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. And I think that there's been a lot that's been happening within the financial services space to make it more exciting for individuals to plan for their retirement. So I do think that there are a lot of innovative tools, from tax-free savings accounts, and of course your traditional investment tools like a retirement annuity, a pension fund. And there's a whole lot of reasons why there's so many different aspects to it, because each of them have their different benefits. But essentially what I'm saying is that there are various buckets, tools, and investment options that have actually made it easy for us to control how much you're saving, how much you're putting away, what kind of gains you actually want to see on your investment returns, and also making sure that by the time you do decide to retire, you have enough money in the bank. And that's essentially what retirement is. So I think, going back to your initial question, when do I want to retire? Probably multiple times in my life. and not to sit on a rocking chair and do nothing, but rather just to explore and expand the different opportunities that I want to do in life. So yeah, here's to always being active and just having the money and the resources to make it happen.
Here's to that. I think you answered it quite perfectly, because 65 doesn't look, these days, 65 doesn't look like what it looked like a few decades ago. I think the vitality, keeping fit, knowing a lot about health components helps us to have that option to say, I may be able to go beyond 65. I will be able to do it. I might need to do it. So
there's actually a fun fact I should tell you, that because we're living longer, and a company and an institution like Sanlam recently published some data that the first person to live to the year 200 has already been born. So if we think 60, yeah, girl, 200. Can you imagine living that long? I don't know what will happen to my back with arthritis or high blood pressure and all those other things. But that's essentially how we should be thinking, that we're likely going to live longer. So if you have the opportunity to, those are the concepts that we need to start thinking about, is that how do you want to experience and live life through those different phases? I don't think I want to make it to 200 though. Maybe have enough of that in my bank account, but not 200 in age.
That fact on its own, it's putting yet another, what can I say? It's saying to us more that savings is not an option. Despite expenses going up and the lifestyles that we are exposed to and that we want to attain, but savings now is not an option, because we live it longer. And you know, the pocket that you are saving up for your future should be able to stretch. The vitality, investing in your body and your life should be able to take you through all of those. Let's just make overall better decisions for ourselves. So that's a fantastic answer right there. The last question, is it really last, or can I come up with another one? But
it might have to be, but we'll see.
Okay. You mentioned Generation W, Gen W, as opposed to Gen X and all the other gens that we know. And I think this is an exciting little coined term there. I heard it for the first time from your talk. Gen W. Tell us, what is Gen W to you? What does it mean? Do you think your upbringing, because when you started your TEDx talk, you opened up with the journey to school that you would have, the drive to school that you would have with your dad, do you think he has impacted you in living a life that, can I say, goes according to what you say Gen W is?
Oh, for sure. If there's any fact that people need to know about me, on a personal basis, I'm an absolute daddy's girl, and yet my mother's best friend. So my parents have really played a very significant role in my thoughts, in how they've shaped my worldview, my perceptions about money, how I relate to a lot of people. So strong influences, no doubt. And coming back to the concept of Generation W, and you're quite right, we've heard a lot of themes, right? Gen X, Gen Z, millennials and the likes. And what's been interesting to see is that there's an introduction of generation wealth, that we as millennials, as Gen Zs and other generations that are coming up behind us, really have the opportunity to recapture, reconfigure, I guess, the theme of wealth for ourselves. And many of us, I guess, with previous generations have often focused on money. And this is quite important because I've interacted with a lot of corporate clients who have highlighted that baby boomers, the guys born in the 60s and the 50s, and maybe even early 40s, are now that generation that is transcending and moving on that wealth to millennials as well as Gen Zs. And they have a lot of concerns as to how this younger generation is actually going to spend their money. So what it's telling us is that the concept of wealth is also changing from what our grandparents and our parents thought to what we think. Because how we approach wealth is, yes, we want the money in the bag. Yeah, we want to secure it. But we're also conscious of our health. We're also conscious of our mindset. We're also conscious of our spirituality and well-being. We're also very conscious about the social relationships that we have. And hence, in as much as we might be a generation that's so easy to access on social media and a few other platforms, I've picked up that our particular generation really does have the opportunity not only to be more conscientized about the options and the variety of resources that money can be spent on, because we publicly display that, right? It's the new cars that we're able to buy. It's the properties that we're able to purchase. It's the holidays that we're able to go on. It's the psychologist that you're able to pay for. And I think that's important, that we actually start recognizing the power and influence of money as a resource. It's not the be all and end all of the world, but what really makes individuals live a quality life is how it is that you use that resource and how you use it as a tool to make your life a lot better. So again, going back to Generation W and thinking of the concept of wealth overall, how you earn your money, where you spend your money, how you spend your money on yourself for self-development and studying and the likes going forward, really do speak to Generation W. And I think we're really in a favorable position because opportunities to invest, to create wealth, to start businesses, we spoke about side hustles. We're really a generation that has all these opportunities at our fingertips and really do need to do our best to continue to exploit them. So here's to creating wealth, here's to leaving a legacy of wealth, and not just financial wealth, but really wealth that speaks to one's overall well-being as well.
Holistic, wow.
Yeah.
With that, do you have maybe a memory that stands out where maybe you had a conversation with your dad or your mom that just gave you a head start, that you go back to when you're going through life, regarding the choice of career or just the choices that you make in money? Is there a conversation that you think sticks out about that?
Ooh, tough one. I probably have to apply my mind to that one a little bit more. But I am very lucky that I grew up in a dual income household. So that already was something that was a tangible proof and an example to me that as a woman, you can meet a partner and build a marriage and a relationship where you're both contributing to the household. Doesn't matter what kind of dynamics it is, but where there's a sense of flexibility and income generation on the mother's part, and income and generational wealth contribution as well from my father's part. So the beautiful thing is that there's this partnership that I could actually witness and see where the money is being allocated to, how the resources are being driven, but also it created a safe space where we could actually talk about money. Now, we didn't necessarily talk about which stocks to invest in. That took place a lot later in life, primarily also based on the job that I have. But what it did open me up to was the fact that, number one, you need to work. You need to add some kind of level of productivity to make sure that you're able to earn some kind of income. You're not going to earn it by sitting around doing nothing. So being productive. And number two, also having a clear plan and a strategy as to what it is that you want to use your money for. And for me, my mother had stock files and, as I said, a couple of side hustles, because it was very clear that we needed money to cover a few other spaces, whether it was school or textbooks and varsity and other themes alike. But she made a plan, and it was quite clear where she's going to allocate her resources and her time to be productive, to earn an income, and then allocate that to covering whatever goal or objective we had as a family unit. So I think those are two things for me that really do stand out. Sometimes we really all wish we could win the lotto, but there's also some beauty to being productive, creating something, charging a fee and a price for it, and then actually realizing that, hold on, there's growth to this, and this is the reward that I'm earning. So I guess those would be probably two examples that I could think of. And if I can jump the gun, I did see a question earlier from Zibu who had asked if salaries have kept up with inflation. And Ziba would think no. Funny enough, I just did a recent interview on KayaBiz yesterday with an institution called Float Pay, and they had highlighted that at least half of South African companies that they surveyed are not going to pay out any bonuses. So that should tell us something. If a lot of people aren't getting bonuses, and we've also seen in the last year a lot more businesses have gone under financial turmoil and trouble. Retrenchments, salary cuts have really been the reality of the lives of many South Africans. And just looking at the unemployment figures, we all can see that if you are able to have a sense of, productivity and earn an income for it. And when I say productivity, I keep it quite broad. You could be an influencer. Heck, you could be the head of HR at some company. But as long as you're doing something that is able to contribute financially to your pocket, you're in a very favorable position. So I would say, no, not from what I've seen. But of course, there are certain spaces and unique circumstances where either because of your career, either because of the company you work for, either because of the sector you're exposed to, or maybe you've just had a good run and its business has been great. Some people might find that they've been able to see their salaries increase. So Yeah, those are just a few of the thoughts I thought I should share before I have to dash in a few seconds. But I've
Uh,
really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that there's more nuggets that our guests can pick up in the TED Talk that's available on YouTube.
Yes, don't forget, guys, go check out the link. It's on our bio, it's on Gugu's bio. We will keep on sharing that TEDx talk. It's full of nuggets. I've seen a lot of people asking us to save this particular chat. I will do that and be able to share it with whoever is interested in it. So, any parting words from your side as we are about to dash?
Well, that life is what you make of it. You know, sometimes we're not all dealt with the same cards. Sometimes we go through a few more valleys than we do going through mountaintops. But the truth is that you have the opportunity to be a co-creator and co-conspirator of your life. In as much as we all want wealth, we're not all going to win the lotto. So find that thing that you enjoy doing that does really translate into some kind of income for you, and create opportunities of wealth for yourself. Money is great in the bank, but you also want to have the capacity to spend that money. So take care of your mental health, which is wealth. Take care of your physical vitality as well and ability. And let's go get that bag, guys. 2022 is waiting for us. So here's to generation wealth and making more money. And not just more money, but more money that can create more opportunities for us too.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming through. I'm Pertunia from your TEDx University of South Africa. For all of us, next year we're having a lot of events. We're going to have a lot of talks. So from me and Gugu, it's cheers for now. Bye.
Thanks, guys.